Democratic Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal has been hosting packed town halls in Washington state, addressing her voters' concerns about federal funding cuts. Hundreds of constituents have gathered to voice their anxieties about potential Republican-backed changes to programs like Medicaid and Social Security. The Congresswoman has also kicked off a program she's calling the Resistance Lab, a series of sessions aimed at turning the anger of those constituents into action. That's what I'm talking about. Democratic Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal of Washington joins us now. Bring that resistance, Congresswoman. Let's talk. Come on.
So we have sound from one of your town halls where a constituent is addressing the cuts to the federal workforce. Let's take a listen.
40% of my team was fired. Today I had to tell a grad student who had traveled here from Maine that the person she was most excited to meet was not available for her to talk to. Is Congress thinking about the long-term loss of science capacity that we are experiencing?
Even if we can stop or restore some of these cuts, the damage of the people that we're losing, the human beings that we're losing, the knowledge that we're losing, is going to be irreplaceable.
That's a point we were literally just discussing, Congresswoman. It's that the pain I heard in that woman's voice. I have to imagine there were lots of folks that had similar stories or were just concerned about, you know, if they're going to get their Social Security checks or if they're going to be able to keep their Medicaid. What else have you been hearing?
No, that's exactly right. I mean, I think, you know, we are starting to literally stock tissue boxes at our town halls because people get up and they talk about what is happening to them and their families and their fears. But they also talk about, as this constituent did, what it means for the country. I mean, there was another woman who got up and she's pregnant. She has a young child already. And she was in tears, and she said she was Googling, how do I go to Canada to get a vaccine for my baby? And so at every level, I think we are seeing what this destruction has looked like and the cruelty. I mean, I think that I was on a plane back from Seattle or to Seattle the other day, and the flight attendant pulled me aside and he said, when did America become so cruel? Now, you and I both, all of us know that America has been cruel at many, many, many times in our country's history. But there was an idea that we were trying to be better, that we were trying to create a more perfect union. And I think what we're seeing now is people worried that the rate of destruction of these agencies and the way it's being done is devastating not only people, but our entire ability to function as a country. And so incompetence, cruelty, the stealing, you know, people raise all the time, and I'm going to go speak at one of the Tesla takedowns later today across the country. But people talk about how this was supposed to be about, you know, draining the swamp. Remember those words, draining the swamp? This is like a whole out stealing from the American people, and the $4.5 trillion tax break for the wealthiest that they're trying to push through is on the backs of taking away health care, you know, food safety, pharmaceutical drugs being affordable, our entire healthcare system, all of those things.
There's also an opportunity cost to the fact that they are not focused on the right things, something that you, Representative DeLauro and Schakowsky, DOGE et al. are looking into as it relates to Medicare. Let me read you just a little bit of this. You're calling on the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services to enact urgent reforms to Medicare Advantage plans. As the Trump administration and Elon Musk look for ways to cut fraud and wasteful spending, corporate Medicare Advantage plans should be a major target to save billions each year. If they were, in fact, worried about waste, fraud, and abuse, where is it that they would be focused?
They would be focused right on what I call Medicare disadvantage plans. Now, the whole reason Medicare Advantage came about, and it's not Medicare, it is private insurance companies that use the name Medicare and are contracted by the federal government to provide things that Medicare does not provide, like dental, vision, and hearing. They have started to use that as a way to take over the Medicare system and privatize it. And in the process, they are cutting seniors out of the care that they need. I've had so many constituents call and say, I got on Medicare Advantage because all these things were promised, but they're not giving it to me. They're not allowing me to get my basic health care. They have doctors that are actually telling my doctors that I can't get the treatment that my doctors say. The fraud and abuse within the Medicare disadvantage system is substantial, and it's hundreds of billions of dollars that could be taken and put towards providing, through traditional Medicare, the benefits that seniors desperately need. So it's sort of a 1-2 punch, because they're privatizing Medicare, and then they're also slashing Medicare, Social Security, and Medicaid, the ways that people are able to get the kind of care that they desperately need, and those Social Security checks that often pay for whatever pharmaceutical drugs they can afford, or their housing, or any of those other things. These are critical programs, and the whole goal here is power to be able to unilaterally slash and burn, so that a very tiny few group of people at the top are able to get even richer, and everybody else is down and literally destroyed in terms of their families.
Congresswoman, let the record reflect that, you and I, in any other universe, probably on Earth 2, 3, and 4, would disagree a lot on a lot of big policy issues.
Michael.
He's still a Republican.
I'm still a Republican. But here's where you and I are aligned, and I think it's important for America to know what this moment requires from each of us. This idea that we have in front of us a threat, a direct threat to our liberties, to our sense and appreciation of freedom, and more importantly, the fundamental constitutional idea that every one of us, you and me, despite our policy disagreements, are still Americans. We're still protected by this wonderful Constitution that the framers didn't include you or me in, right? But we now own it. So I appreciate the storylines that you're leveling up about resistance to this idea that you and me are not worthy to be Americans. Our friend Joan Walsh, in a piece for The Nation, wrote, quoting you, "We can control that we have to stand up and fight back, and we cannot be seen as just rolling over, because the minute we do, they're going to do it to us again." That's what this is about. This isn't resistance because I don't like you. I don't like where you stand on health care, or resistance because I don't like where you stand on taxes. This is resistance because we don't like what Donald Trump and Elon Musk and Pam Bondi and Pete Hegseth are doing to our country.
That's right, Michael. And, you're exactly right. You and I have disagreed on so many things, but there was a common fundamental idea that brought us together, that brought together every American, no matter where you live, no matter what party you ascribe to, no matter what the color of your skin is. And that is that there are protections that are built into the Constitution. For example, the protection of free speech, which actually applies to everybody across this country. The ability for us to, be able to have checks and balances in the system, so that no single person can take complete power and say, I like you, I don't like you, I'm going to do this, without any authorities checking that it's good for the country, right? And so in that Constitution, what you see is these checks and balances that stop a dictator or an authoritarian. And what happens when democracies fall and when they go to dictatorship? What happens is that every one of those checks and balances is neutralized or destroyed. So think about think about Congress. They are taking Article I powers that were given to Congress for us to be able to say, this is where the money goes. We actually have the authority to determine where the money goes. They are destroying institutions that have the right to allow free speech, college campuses, as an example. They are actually disappearing people, and this is something that hasn't, I think, gotten enough attention. They are literally taking people on the streets in a way that you might see in authoritarian governments, and they are disappearing them out of the country or into jails far, far away from where their families are. And it's happening by the hundreds, and it's being praised as something that is just about immigrants. But let me tell you something. This is about every one of us. Because if you can do that to a legal permanent resident, somebody who's here on a legal valid visa because you don't like what they are saying or you don't agree with them, then every American has to worry about what that means for them, because they're just testing limits of power with immigrants as sort of being the canary in the coal mine. But the Constitution is very clear about this, that we are all protected by these fundamental rights. And so I think that this is what is so difficult in this moment. They are doing it all at once because it's difficult to focus. But I think when you strip public education from 50 million kids, that's 90% of kids in the K-12 system. When you cripple universities to be able to have free speech, when you start making deals with law firms and law firms start caving to the demands of a dictator because they want to be one of the few that save, they don't want to be one of the ones that are cut. That is exactly how democracies fall. And that is why we're doing this resistance lab. And tomorrow, we'll have, I think it's now over 1,800 people plus over 120 groups that are going to be Zooming for this training on how you resist and what are the most effective tactics to resist dictators trying to take over democracies.
That's my church hanky, Michael.
I saw the hanky, and we'll leave that exclamation point by Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal right there. Thank you so much, Congresswoman, for being with us.